was flying out to Denver, Colorado. And there's no direct flight from Buffalo to Denver, Colorado, so we had to stop in Chicago. And Chicago's got O'Hare, or is it O'Hare? I don't know if it's O'Hare or O'Hare, or what, but it's O'Hare Airport, and it's just massive. You know, you walk around, and there's just so many planes, and the tarmac is so big, and there's people all over the place, escalators, and people walking, and airplane pilots, and stewardesses. It's absolutely huge. It's just a big, wonderful airport. I think it's like, when I was there, I think it was the first or second largest airport in America, and I think it's like third right now. But I don't know if it's O'Hare or O'Hare. I really know. I hear it both ways. I'm not real sure. But you really wonder, how'd they ever get that name? O'Hare International Airport. Well, they named it after a man by the name of Butch O'Hare. Butch O'Hare was a Navy officer. Do we have any Navy officers in the church? Do we have any Navy officers in the church? Val, oh yeah, Val's a Navy officer. Val, you know, he's out of the Navy now, but he's a commander. So if you call him Commander Jensen, you'll be all right. Because even though he's retired, you can still refer to him as Commander. That's his official title. But anyway, Butch O'Hare was a resident of Chicago, and he was a Navy officer. He was actually a lieutenant commander, and he was a pilot, and he was a fighter pilot. And one day, February 20th, 1942, Butch O'Hare was stationed on the Lexington aircraft carrier. You ever see those aircraft carriers? They're huge. They're just so big that the planes can fly on them and fly off them. Just absolutely massive. Well, the Lexington aircraft carrier was there with a bunch of other ships. And all the pilots, they went on a raid. They went out to fly up against the Japanese people, the Japanese, you know, army or something. So they were off on a mission. All the fighter pilots were off on a mission. And Butch O'Hare was with them. And Butch O'Hare was flying his plane. And all of a sudden he looked down at the gas gauge and he realized that I'm not going to be able to make it all the way to the target that we're going to and get back. I can't do it. I don't have enough fuel. What am I going to do? Well, the only thing he can do is turn back and go back to the Lexington aircraft carrier. So he starts heading back to the Lexington aircraft carrier, and all of a sudden, he sees a squadron of Japanese Zeros. And Japanese Zeros were fighter planes, a whole squadron of them, and they're coming to try to sink the Lexington and all the other ships accompanying the Lexington. So he's flying there, and he sees these Japanese Zeros coming, and he can't get to the American planes. He can't radio the Lexington. What's he going to do? He just sees all these Japanese squadron full of airplanes. So what does he do? He flies right into them. Machine guns, he had 50 caliber machine guns on the wings. And he just flew right into them. Kept shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting at him. And all of a sudden he ran out of ammunition. When he ran out of ammunition, he started his plane diving all around the plane, trying to maybe nip the back of their tail of their plane, or maybe hit one of the wings and try to knock them out of the plane. So he started flying all over the place and hitting the wings and hitting the tails, and finally knocked out 5 Japanese Zeros. And the Japanese got so frustrated that they just took off and left. And Butch O'Hare landed on the Lexington aircraft carrier. The people of Chicago were so honored by that they named O'Hare International Airport after Butch O'Hare. He received the Congressional Medal of Honor at the age of 28. 1 year later, he died fighting for his country. You know, he stood in the gap between the enemy and the American forces. Do you ever think about what that means, to stand in the gap of something? I've got a passage of scripture here. Bobby, you have the overhead? In the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel says this: I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it, but I found no one. He's looking for someone to stand in the gap. What does it mean to stand in the gap? Well, in the ancient world, when they had a city, they would build a big wall around that city to protect the citizens from invading armies. And every once in a while, those invading armies would knock down part of the wall, and there would be a big gap in the wall. And once there's a big gap, that whole army could go through that big gap and destroy all the citizens in that city. So what they needed was men to stand in that gap, spears, bow and arrows, or swords, or whatever. Somebody to stand in that gap to protect the city. And that's what God is saying here through Ezekiel. God is looking for people to stand in the gap on behalf of the land. And what he means is that Israel at this time has fallen away from God. They've said, well, we don't care if God exists. We don't really care. We don't go to the temple anymore. We're not going to honor God. We're cheap people. All we worry about is our money, and we just worry about ourselves. But we don't worry about God. And what Ezekiel's calling for is people to stand in the gap. Somebody to stand there, tell these people that God is important, God is real. You need to listen to God, you need to read the scriptures, you need to be going to church or going to the temple. And that's what he's saying, because he wants people to stand in the gap. Well, in our day and age, we need somebody to stand in the gap too. I mean, I saw or heard a report on the news the other day that said that 86% of all Americans believe that our country is going in the wrong direction. Now, I don't know why they believe that. There might be a number of reasons why they believe that. Personally, I believe it's going in the wrong direction because they don't follow God's instructions anymore. They don't read the Bible, they don't go to church, they just don't seem to care about God. So what we need to do is have people stand in the gap. And that's what Peter brings up in 1 Peter 3, verses 11 through 13. This is what Peter says. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Who is going to harm you if you are able to do good? What he's saying is, be courageous. We live in a world where we're inundated with fear. There's fear of terrorists. That's why there's so much problems at the airport. Because of fear. We're all living in fear of this, or fear of that, or fear of the other. And what Peter is saying to us today, we need to stand in the gap. We need not to fear anything. No matter what happens, God is still in control. No matter what happens to our country, no matter what happens to our economy, no matter what happens to anything in this world, God is still in control. The other thing he's saying too is that we need to share the gospel with people, to tell people about Jesus. I was with a group of friends the other day, and we were just talking about how things are going, and we were saying, oh, this is bad, and that's bad, and this person's doing this, and that person's doing that. And I just looked at him and said, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus is the answer to every problem we've got on the face of it. He is the only answer to all the problems we've got. Tell them about Jesus. Jesus is the answer to all the problems. That's how we stand in the gap. We're losing our country, but we need to stand in the gap. We need to be courageous. We need to tell them about Jesus. But he also says in this passage too that we need to do it in a kind and gentle way. There was a little boy. He was in school, and he was drawing a picture on a piece of paper. And his teacher came by, and she said, "What are you drawing a picture of?" And he looked up and says, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And she looked up and said, "Well, you can't draw a picture of God. Nobody's ever seen God." He looked up at her and said, "When they see my picture, they'll see God." Be kind and gentle. Show them God. Show them God. Be kind, gentle, and loving to whoever you encounter. Because those people are out there are hurting, and we need to show them that God knows and God cares about all their problems. You know, in 1775 in Virginia, the Virginia people were debating whether or not they should join the revolution and become part of the American colonists' rebellion against the British and start their own country. And Patrick Henry stood up in front of that conference and said, "I know not what others may do, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." And he was willing to put his life on the line so that we could have freedom. And you think about all these people throughout the history of our country that have put their lives on the line for this country. And I think of people like Dale Jensen. I mean, he's a military man, he was in the Navy, he was in Iraq, and you see all these people putting their lives on the line so that we can have freedom, so that we can have liberty. They stood in the gap so that our enemies couldn't come in here and take us over and take our liberty and take our freedom. We need people, you guys need to stand in the gap because our country is going down the wrong road for whatever reason people believe. But I think they're going down the wrong road because they've lost the concept that God is and God cares for them. We need to stand in that gap. We need to be courageous and bold no matter what happens. Be of courage because no matter what happens, God's got everything under control. We need to tell them about Jesus. Tell them about Jesus. Jesus is the answer to all our problems. And tell them in a kind, loving way. Show them God. Mrs. Loos, you got a thesis? Oh, yeah, I forgot to read.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're right. Okay, let's stand up and sing our